Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening. All board members except Mike Murray are in attendance. Do I have approval for the agenda as presented?
So moved.
By Stacy, second. Second. By Todd. Any changes or revisions? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 6-0. Next we have the check or the consent agenda, which includes the check wire, transfer and disbursement summary, approval of the school board minutes from September 12th and September 26th, resignations, terminations, and non-renewals as presented, donations of an HP LaserJet printer from Regents Hospital for Five Hawks Elementary, $116,256 from the Laker Athletic Booster Club for the 2009-2011 seasons for athletic programs at Prior Lake High School, $300 from Fairview Health Services for activities and programs at Prior Lake High School, $450 from Finish Line Chiropractic for activities at the high school. We have Loretta Spurley, Breon Silman, and Marlis Gesme in cooperation with the Wells Fargo Community Support Fund for the high school. $9,613 through Target's Take Charge of Education for the high school, and $2,712 for the Twin Oaks Middle School. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
By Tom, second. By Lee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 6-0.
Eric, if
Yes.
I can, we need to approve a clerk treasurer for the board meeting.
Thank you very much. I need to appoint a temporary clerk treasurer. I'd ask Director Anderson to take that.
Okay.
Thank you. Any objections to that?
None.
Okay. Do I need to vote on it? No? Okay. Next we have Laker Pride, and we have Laker Showcase with Greenwood Elementary.
Is it down here?
Yeah.
School board members, Superintendent Groover, distinguished guests, welcome. My name is Patrick Glenn, and with my special guest here, Stacia McKinney, we're going to share a little showcase about Greenwood, our healthy snack program, aren't we, Stacia? Last year I had an opportunity to share about our healthy snack program and some survey data that we did with parents to see how well our program launched last year. We started it in February and made it available to all students grades 1 through 5 in our building as a way to increase positive choices for snack items, to eliminate some financial hardships with our families, and to kind of transition away the concept of snacking with treats, snack with healthy things. We're in our second year now as we move forward with this, and I just want to quick review some of the data that you may have seen last spring. First of all, we asked our families how they felt about our healthy snack program, and it was overwhelmingly they were extremely satisfied or satisfied. We asked our parents about the specifics for their children, what they thought their children, how their level of satisfaction was. They also thought that the kids were extremely satisfied or satisfied, the majority of them. We asked them, had they noticed any eating habits? There was a change specifically. And then a lot of people answered, I think, real honestly on that one, and there wasn't a big notice for them. But on the flip side, they do believe that this concept allowed their students to consume more fruits and vegetables on a regular basis, so that was real positive. 3 major things that they really liked about the program was the fact that there was a variety of food choices, the cost, and the convenience for our students at our school was important. And the biggest question was, do you think your child is going to participate in the program again this year? And 55 out of 56 people that answered said yes, they thought that they would. And we've had kind of an overwhelming turnout this year. But this is data from the parents. So I want to give Stacia an opportunity, and she's going to share a little data about the students' perspective. Really loud.
Hi, my name is Stacia McKinney. I am a 4th grader in Mrs. Zach's class at Greenwood. Last Friday, Ms. Zach asked our class a few questions about the Healthy Snack Program. These questions were, what do you like about it, and what could we improve to it? Here is the information from my class. Mr. Glenn and I grouped the answers into a few different categories. As you can see, 8 students recognized that the Healthy Snack Program provides convenience for students and family. This means we cannot forget to bring our snack from home ever. Many other students also liked the many options made comments that the choices are nutritious and delicious. We also have a few suggestions. Some students commented they would appreciate a few more options on the cart, as you can see, including more fruits and vegetables, was the highest. Lastly, in our message of the day this morning, Ms. Zach asked us a data gathering question. We built a graph of our favorite snack options from last Friday. As you can see, Goldfish was the winner, my favorite. Thank you for allowing me to share about the Greenwood Healthy Snack Program.
Thank you, Stacia. Just a minute. Now, there's a few new things that are happening related to our program this year. With year 2 always comes a few changes. Some things I want to share with you is that last year we had 267 students that participated. That was 70% of our student population. This year, we have 296 students. That's 83%. When we first started this program, the school that we modeled it after said that they had reached 90% participation, and so we're definitely moving in that category. Last year, we had 15 choices that we intermingled on the cart. This year, we've grown that to 21 different choices, so we're spreading out a little bit. We also have some dedicated funds through partnerships with Edelweiss Bakery, Devani's, and Fong's grant dollars that support Greenwood to help support our scholarship portion with this. This isn't completely self-sufficient. We do need some additional dollars to help make sure that it runs for everybody. And some of the biggest things I know we heard from the students was the implementation of a routine for classrooms to refill the cart. Stacia, sometimes when you're in the lunchroom, every once in a while one of those buckets goes empty, doesn't it? Yes. So each classroom has representatives that know how to refill the cart if they see something. And the reason it's in the lunchroom is that when the kids leave the lunchroom, that's when they pick up their snack. So it can be monitored by the same person that's in the lunchroom. We don't have a dedicated person to do that. For classrooms that eat the snack in the afternoon, great. They bring it right back to the room and they can do that later in the afternoon. If they don't eat it until the next morning, they put it in an identified bag and they put that in the refrigerator back in the room, and they have a representative that comes down in the morning to get it. So we have a lot of pieces went into the routine of it, and we have found to make it work. Every once in a while we stumble with some things, but that's the reality of it. Now our goals this year is we'd like to implement some of the suggestions from the parent survey, and there's quite a bit of feedback that we had gotten on that we're going to look at this year, if it's possible. We're going to increase our fruit and veggie options. It's hard to find individually wrapped veggie items. That's tricky. We need to really delve into that this year. Maybe we're going to host an all-fruit and veggie day where we'll just put fruit and vegetables on the cart. That's a possibility that was raised. And we'd like to survey all the 4th and 5th graders, not just Mrs. Zach's room, to get their feedback on things too. So I want to thank you today. Do you have any questions about our Healthy Snack Program?
So from day to day, the snacks change, so it isn't exactly the same thing every day?
Right.
Okay.
depending on what's ordered and what's available and how things go fast. I know one of the things at the younger grade is the Go-Gurt. Huge hit for the younger grades kids. Sometimes that goes kind of quick, so that when that shipment comes through, that'll move off, and they have to make a different choice. Like I said, I think we really need to look at fruit and vegetable options to help balance it out a little bit more. We just have to figure out how to get those.
So did you say that the snacks are available at lunchtime, so they can't get it in the morning when they get there and then have it for a morning snack?
Any student that would need to have something to eat in our building that maybe didn't have breakfast or is hungry in the morning, every classroom has access to it. We're not denying anybody the opportunity if they need something. It's available in where it's stored throughout the day. It's just put in the lunchroom because of the part of the routine of kids pick it up when they leave the lunchroom. That's worked well for our school. Some other people have had dedicated people that have gone around the building and delivered it. They've had students that have done that and staff people. That's the routine that we worked for our building, basically.
So, Stacia, in your class, when do most people have their snack?
Probably we have it like at the end of the day, and like right before we pack up to go.
Okay.
That works for your classroom. Everybody's a little bit different. I'd say it's about 50-50, depending upon their schedule and the day. That really determines when the good snack time would be.
Okay.
Great idea.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us opportunity to share our Laker Showcase on our Healthy Snack Program.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
We do have a special treat. No pun intended. If you would like an item from our cart, you may have one.
I'll do the goldfish. Thank you. I'll goldfish.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Next, we have, I'm sorry, I got lost on my agenda here. Energy Star Award, Jim Delwo and Sherry Brunner.
Good evening, Chairman Pratt, School Board, Dr. Groover. Tonight, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about Energy Star Award that we recently got for the Eden Prairie, or Prior Lake High School. Boy, it's been a long time. I'm sorry. Sherry has a copy of the two awards that we received. One is the Leader Award, and one is the
This is top overall energy.
Top Overall Energy
And then 10%.
Performer.
So top performer and 10% improvement.
And Margaret Bishop is a engineer who's been tracking our energy use since 2005. We would like for her to kind of tell the story behind the cost avoidance and the awards and all that. There's a real pattern of consumption that I'm really proud of. Our district is doing a lot of things right. And with that, I'll hand it off to Margaret Bishop.
Thanks, Jim. Eden Prairie. Okay. For Energy Star, you guys know that the high school recently received an award for the building itself. It was ranked high enough. It has a score higher than 75 on Energy Star. That means that it's in the top 25 percentile of the United States. Now, that's just for that building. But as a district as a whole, Energy Star now recognizes the district, and that is, which one's the 10%? This is for the whole district, showing a 10% improvement district-wide of all of your buildings. So they recognize you as a district of achieving a significant improvement. And then the other award is a top overall performer. That means that looking at all of your buildings together, a certain percentage is above that 75, so they're recognizing you as a district that your buildings are significantly better than the 75% others in the United States. So these are pretty significant awards. There aren't a lot of them out there in Minnesota. There's like one or two that have gotten to the 20%, and that's our goal, 20 and 30% awards. So congratulations. It's a big step. And up here on your screens, I have the current scores for the district. Edgewood, I'm not quite sure what happened there, but you can see the rest of these buildings are all up there pretty high, above the 75. You have two buildings that aren't, and that's Hidden Oaks, and then down here, Twin Oaks. So those are the two buildings that we really need to focus on to bring them up. And I know Jim said you guys are going to do some recommissioning at Hidden Oaks, so that may definitely help that building.
Also mention the swimming pools.
Oh, the swimming pools also are a significant cost and use factor for that. So to give you a little background on energy use, let's get over here and click on, show you this slide. As Jim said, I've been tracking the district's utility costs since 2005, 2006. I tracked for about like 15 school districts in Minnesota. This is a breakdown of the utility costs for last fiscal year, 2010, 2011. Just to kind of give you an impression, $1.2 million is what you spend on utilities. It's a pretty significant part of your budget. Of that, electric is your biggest cost. If you have questions anytime, just stop me and I'll try to answer that. So this is kind of a historical perspective since 2005, 2006. And you can see that it sort of climbed up and then it started going back down again. And to me, pretty significant here is that this last year you spent as much on utility as you did 5 years ago, 2005, 2006. That's pretty significant savings. If you stop and think about what's happened since then, electric costs have actually increased 43%. Natural gas prices have gone down. They're very volatile, so that's always changing. You brought on the pool for Hidden Oaks. You opened up Red Tail, and you've added a ton of smart boards, labs, a lot of electric load in those buildings. So to say that you're using or spending the same amount, that's significant to me with all that coming on board. So that shows up when you get these big awards from the federal government. I talk a lot about baselines in the reports that I provide to Jim, and just pretty quickly, baselines are what you would have done had you done nothing in those buildings. We take a point in time and say, okay, from this point forward, we're going to see how you're doing. So we're using past history to project into the future. And we have different, your district's kind of unique. We set up different baselines for each building depending on what was happening. A lot of districts will just set 1 year, so we kind of have a little different going on here. This is the actual energy use, not dollars, but energy use for your district since 05, 06. And you can see the trend line there going down, but the question, as Minnesotans, we all must ask, weather. If we have a really cold winter, of course, our energy use is going to jump up significantly. And that's where that baseline comes into play. So this is that same graph, but I've superimposed the baseline. So it's taking into account if it's a cold winter or a warm winter. And you can see 2010, 2011 was actually very similar to that 07, 08 year. And you're still showing that significant decrease in use. I'm going to skip this one because it's the dollar version of the one. And when I do the dollar cost, I'm taking this year's utilities cost and applying it to the baseline year. So you're comparing apples to apples with that. This is one that all the district guys always are looking forward to when I get it done every year, and I'm just finishing it up. But this is the districts that I track in Minnesota, a comparison on how they're doing. So it's all for the fiscal year 2010, 2011. And I kind of blank out the names to protect those that aren't doing very well. But you're on there as Prior Lake. It's the pink one. You're at 61.2. This is a combination of your electric use, your gas use, and oil use is rolled up into BTU, and then square footage, we take it as a common denominator. So the average for all the districts so far is at 68, and you guys are definitely below that at 61.2. There are a couple of districts that are a little lower than you. Austin is the A on the other end. And they've been very aggressive. They've got actually ice storage going on at their high school for cooling. They've done a lot of automation stuff. West St. Paul is the one on the other end, and they've been very aggressive also. This is the same graph, but in dollars. The average is 95 cents, and you guys are down at 82 cents. One of the reasons I always focus on energy use is because you guys don't have a lot of control over your rate structures or who your utility is. For instance, Rochester Public Schools has Rochester Public Utilities. Their rate structure is horrendous compared to Xcel Energy. They get hit with what they call ratchet charges. They pay $18 a kilowatt hour, where you guys are only paying around 10 to 11. So that's why I tend to focus on energy use. It's a more even comparison. You guys also do have some local municipal utilities, so some of your rates are a little bit higher depending on the building. And then this is just a graph of your buildings and how they compare to each other, which tends to get a little competitive when I show it to the actual guys at the building. Wow, why are you so high? You know, I'm doing so much better. But this also is a tool for us to use as to saying, okay, we really need to start looking at Grainwood and what can we do there to bring that energy use down. This building is a little high, but you're also taking a building that wasn't really designed for what it's being used for. So that's kind of an impact for this building.
Grainwood is also the oldest building in the district.
And that will definitely cause that to happen.
What was the building on the blue, the little symbols in the way I can't read?
That's the one on the far
left.
left. That's the service center.
Oh, that's
This is
here?
the-
That's here.
this
This is you.
This building.
Again, one of our old.
The old bowling alley. So,
No, I think that's what's interesting is the comment that's just made. You can really see the age of the buildings and where they rank.
very much so.
And the impact of the pool.
The pool is a big thing. When I get done with this, there's one other district that isn't done yet. I then break it out by elementary so you can see how your elementaries compare to everybody else's. I also do it for buildings with pools and then buildings built after 2000, just so you can kind of look and see how they go. Excuse me. And then this same graph flipped over into the dollars. Very similar. But you can really see the impact on the district service center, dollar-wise. One other quick thing. This is your carbon footprint. So along with reducing your energy use, what you're doing is reducing your carbon footprint. And you hear that a lot now. It's a buzzword that's out there. This is actually from the Minnesota B3 benchmarking website, where I take all your data and put it into that. And they have these pretty nice little graphs that you can look at, and shows you that you're significantly reducing your impact on carbon. The 2011 is not a full year, so that's why that's down so low. They don't do it in school years. They do it in a calendar year. So you kind of have to keep flipping around with that. There, I talked really fast. But any questions?
You said if somebody hit a score above 75, they were Energy Stars. So it looked like almost all our buildings, except for the two, met that. Are they all then Energy Star certified? Or?
They are all eligible to be receive the award. And Sherry, we talked about that a little bit beforehand. 6 of them are eligible, but there is you have to go through an engineering review audit of the building. A PE has to go in and make sure that you're following the guidelines. I mean, it'd be really easy to have a good score if you weren't having any lights or heat in the building. So you need that engineer to go through and verify that. And I believe she said we charge a lot. But I believe she said one more school, C, is going to be going through one of them.
C program. We'll be doing one more this year.
Okay.
So
A lot of districts say, okay, we know that we can get it, but we're not going to pay that fee to go through it, but the knowledge is there. And it's something that people recognize. You know, you go shopping and you see Energy Star everywhere, Energy Star washer, dryer, refrigerators. Now you have it on your buildings, and it's just a very recognizable sign to people that's saying you're being good stewards for this district. So congratulations on these awards. Well done.
Eric, if I have a question, if I can ask a question. I noticed the first couple of years of these things, when I do it at my house, you get the low-hanging fruit early on, and you get the big significant savings. What are some of the strategies or techniques or areas you're going to be looking at in the future?
Well, one of the things that you have done, and it hasn't shown up yet, is that the high school, the new condensing boiler that went in, that's going to have a significant impact on that building that we haven't seen. We'll start seeing it if we ever start to get the colder weather. Okay.
Yeah, and we also did some control work at the high school, some lights and some fan distributions. And also the next recommissioning at Hidden Oak, we should have identify lots of options there to help save energy. And the one thing, Rich, you said about low-hanging fruit.
Haven't got them all.
Yeah, we haven't gotten them all, plus they always grow back.
Okay.
They always do, so it's...
And I just wanted to say that it's a big team effort from across the board, starting with the original utility tracking back in 2005, and then we have just built on that, and we've implemented the SEED program, which is just a tool. But, you know, anywhere from our building custodians to our kitchen staff to our students and teachers, they're, you know, constantly working with different strategies, and, you know, everybody's really committed to making these improvements.
Well, I just wanted to say on behalf of the taxpayers and the students and everybody, thank you for your work, because less money going to Excel,
Right.
we can use for that purpose. So, yeah, keep it here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next we have candidates for employment.
Open forum.
Open forum.
Eric,
Okay.
open forum.
Oh, I'm sorry, open forum. Thank you very much. This is the point in our agenda where we offer 15 minutes to residents of the community to address the board on any item that's not part of the agenda. Is there anybody that would like to address the board this evening? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move to candidates for employment.
All right. I would like to recommend the following candidates for employment, and am seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion to approve the candidates as presented?
So moved.
By Rich, second. Second. By Stacy. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 6-0. Next, we have leaves of the absences.
And I present the following leaves of absence, and am seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion to approve as presented? So moved. By Lee, second by Tom. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 6-0. And finally, we have approval of the substitute teacher list.
And lastly, yes, I'm presenting the substitute teacher list for the 2011-12 school year. And the one note that I would like to make is that everybody on this list is properly licensed.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the substitute teacher list as presented?
I'll move.
By Todd, second.
Second.
By Stacy. Any questions? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Next, we have old business 2012-2013 school calendar. Dr. Gruber.
We are bringing back the 2012-13 school calendar after having a discussion at our meet and confirm meeting with our PLSEA teachers, representatives from each site, and our school board members that were present were Chair Pratt and Vice Chair Lee Schimmick. So we had a good, robust conversation about both sides of that spectrum, and Deb Johnson, our PLSEA president, is here tonight to kind of give a very brief, with a few teachers maybe are going to help her give a brief update on the early release dates as proposed on the 12-13 calendar and the purpose of those dates. So welcome.
Good evening. We had a very good conversation at Meet and Confer about early release days, what happens in the classroom during those days, also what teachers are engaged in during their early release time. So I'm going to start, let them introduce themselves, and start with kindergarten, elementary kind of perspective. We're going to give you a brief middle school perspective, and then John and I will finish with a high school kind of perspective. So introduce yourselves.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Jan Lash, and I teach at Edgewood. I teach in the half-day kindergarten program. So given that our building is a little bit unique, that we have kindergarten and then many other early childhood programs, we spent part of our day as during the release time with our entire staff. One of our building goals this year is to look at our own decision-making strategies that we use to help us identify each other's styles of decision-making so that we can try and bring our programming and our staff together and have a little better understanding of each other's decision-making styles. So part of the day we spent doing that, and then the rest of the day we spent analyzing our student data. September we invest a significant amount of time into assessing our kindergarten students, and that has to be one child at a time, given the age. So we gathered our data from the Ames Web assessment that we utilize and also our baseline assessment that we give to each student. So given that we have 160 students in our building, at the kindergarten level, we brought our staff together to look at all of those assessments to help us determine which students would benefit from intervention and how we can best group the students to meet their individual needs. So it gets us off on a good note for the rest of the year. In the early release days, we typically do that because with 160 students, it's really difficult for us to fit that into a typical student contact day. So that's why we definitely appreciate having that time to be able to meet the needs of our students.
Good evening, I'm Melissa Canettle, and I teach language arts at Twin Oaks for both 7th and 8th grade students. Our early release day, the most recent one, really it's business as usual. I mean, class periods are a little bit shorter, but the kids come in expecting that it's business as usual. In my classroom, students continued a lesson that was begun the previous day. Actually having the early release day in that week allowed for me to plan specifically for that lesson, which was worked out well. I popped in during my prep time to a couple of other teachers' classrooms to see how business was going in their classrooms. And our social studies teacher, who happens to be across the hallway from me, she took that day to introduce the community service project to her 7th grade and 8th grade students. They call it Impact. So she introduced the project and then took the opportunity. The kids have a lot of energy on those early release days. They get kind of excited about it, and it's a different day for them. And so rather than working against that, we sort of try to work with that a little bit. And she took the kids outside to work on cleaning up the schoolyard a little bit in terms of emphasizing the importance of, giving back to the community, starting with the school community. I also popped into math teacher, 8th grade math teacher. She used that day as an opportunity to extend the lesson with some kind of a fun activity. I wanted to stick around personally because I was waiting for the kids to solve their equations so they could open the padlock on she had like a toolbox that had a padlock, and then when the kids solved the math problem, it opened the combination and there were treats inside. So free pencils, M&Ms, things like that. So it's really, in terms of the classroom, it's business as usual, just with the idea that the class periods are a little bit shorter to accommodate for the early release. In the afternoon, similar to what Jan was discussing, in our building, because we didn't have MCD data or MAP data for that first early release day, we took an opportunity to sort of reconnect as a staff and work on working together and being able to make kind of that cohesive environment that is important to engaging students, being all on the same page and taking an opportunity to have that conversation across the building that we would not normally get to have in a regular workday. And then now that we have received our MCA data and have finished our map testing, I think today, close tomorrow, our future early release time will definitely be spent looking at that data. Last year we used a lot of our early release time focused on that in terms of improving student scores. So really one of the big pieces that we did was really working with individual students so they were aware of what their score meant and how they could, and then we met with each student beyond that to come up with an individualized plan for each student in terms of setting goals for themselves and in terms of, you know, how they could improve individually on their MCA test scores or MAP scores. But using both those pieces of data to help the students really understand where they were at and where they were headed as a student and how they could use that. So we definitely use those days for that, as well as other, you know, this year in my department we're implementing the smart board technology, and so those early release times will be an opportunity for us to get the training that we need in order to use that effectively in our classrooms.
And Deb Johnson again. I teach family and consumer science at the high school. And as I was talking with some of my colleagues about kind of what went on Wednesday, September 28th, they kind of looked at me and said, well, it was a school day. It was a day with students. One of the math teachers was doing some intensive review and practice for a test they were getting the next day. Social science was doing a lesson on city living and small town living, kind of comparing and contrasting, you know, the different lifestyles, the job availability, some of those things. The math department had just math lessons going on, just things that they would normally do. And in the high school, some periods are shortened, but some periods are still very long because that's over the lunch hours. So you do have a variety of different time periods going on during the day for different classes. And so as we plan for our lessons on those types of days, we still are continuing with our curriculum, with our lessons. We just adjust the time frame to match whatever time we have. My interior design class finished a project they were working on color theory. Creative Foods planned for a lab on Thursday, so that shortened time was a very nice chunk of time to review recipes and do lab planning. My PALS class, which is the class that gets to visit with mentor elementary students, they wrote SMART goals and went over the expectations and the protocol that they follow when they go to the elementary schools. And so it's a school day, it's business as usual, like Melissa said, and you know, there's excitement, and the kids are kind of excited to be able to go home a little bit early, but they all know it's a school day and it's business as usual. So John's going to talk a little bit about the afternoon activities.
Good evening. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to talk to you about some of the observations that I had during our last early release day. And please excuse me as I read it because I want to be as factual as possible. I don't want to put any of my opinion into it, obviously. So during our last early release day on September 28th, I had the opportunity to walk through the building and see how the teachers were using the time allotted during the early release time. And these are some of the things that I observed. Our AP Human Geography teachers were analyzing the 2010-2011 AP HG test scores to figure out what they and their students needed to work on in preparation of this year's exam. The special ed department utilized the Minnesota Department of Education workshop information about MCAs and their development to help teachers design better tests to improve instruction. The special ed department also were attending monitoring and compliance training. The physical science 9th grade team was working on curriculum to teach the new required state standards for science.
Geometry teachers are focused on what to include or exclude from their curriculum based on the MCA2 testing strands. World Language collaborated on assessments that should help students score higher on language proficiency tests and college exam tests. Chemistry teachers were making an effort to increase the number of data-based questions on their chemistry exams, and as they move forward to implement their new curriculum and standards, they're trying to include more of these questions in their lab write-ups as well. Math teachers were analyzing data from the MCA2's math scores and how they would be able to utilize the new math curriculum and textbooks to improve MCA2 math scores. I also had the opportunity to see many teacher groups collaborating in vertical teaming, allowing for common assessments and continuing continuity within subjects as students progress through the school year with the possibility of having different teachers in the same subject. I witnessed teachers working on their professional development plan, and that was a directive by the district professional development personnel earlier in the day. In this day and age in education, with No Child Left Behind data determining the success or failure of school districts, it is my professional opinion that the 8 hours per year of early release is invaluable, and it leads to greater student achievement E through 12. Thank you.
Yes, I just dropped my pen. Thank you, each of you, for preparing and coming tonight and for being a part of the Meet and Confer Committee as we move forward. It's interesting, the board and administration has just had a 2-hour study session about what we want our district to be in the future, and we want to be a district of distinction. We want to continue to embody all that's good about education and make sure that our students are getting the very best education they can receive right here in Prior Lake Savage area schools. I've seen over the last several years a trajectory of improvement and growth of our students in the core subjects as well as in all areas of their academic success. As we've pulled away the parameters, the prerequisites for AP classes, we've increased overfold all the students that take those classes and are doing very, very well. So we're beginning to see some huge improvements, and I want to continue to see those happen. So for me professionally, these 8 hours are really critical to having that continued focus on data-driven decision-making and individualizing our instruction to the student level at all levels, E through 12. So thank you.
You know, just to, I thought the Meet and Confer discussion was a great discussion to have, and just kind of thinking through some of the impressions that I had. I have absolutely no doubt that our teachers are working hard during that time. We heard story after story about groups of teachers getting together and collaborating well past the end of the school day. I got emails from teachers telling me what they did individually throughout the day and how helpful it was. So I know there's a lot of great work going on, and I was really impressed with some of the creativity that teachers did with the shortened periods of time. Deb talked about preparing for a lab. One of the middle school teachers, science teachers, talked about how he used it as a hands-on day because it was a great opportunity for him not to necessarily do a lab and a lecture, but to really focus on that experimental learning. And so those were all some really terrific positives that I took away from it. You know, one of the questions I asked was, gosh, we've been in school now for for 3 weeks. Why do we have an early release day already? And Dan Edwards looked at me almost like I was dense and said, well, that's when the data comes out. And I had that aha moment. We've had teachers taking that half a day, using the data that was just released by the state, It's fresh in their minds. It's fresh data. It helps them prepare for student-teacher conferences coming up this week, and it made a lot of sense. But I still have some problems and some concerns. We've talked about how we utilize one early release day. There are still 3 others that I think we need to figure out how those days directly relate back to students. When you look at our calendar, I continue to have the concern that a 5-day school week is almost the exception rather than the norm. We have a lot of breaks in our calendars that cause disruptions to our families and take the kids out of a routine. I'm not saying that we don't have to continue to invest in this time. I've always questioned, are we investing in the right ways and at the right times? Now, I certainly supported the half-day releases this school year because of the dramatic shifts that we were making in our secondary schedule. And we as a board promised to give the teachers the time and the administration the time to make sure that this implementation went smoothly. And to me, that said, we really have a need for frequency to get together and talk about this rather than depth. But that's this school year, and as we move forward, I think we start getting into more of a routine, and that's where I think we've got to do a better job at how we set up our calendar, how we invest in staff development, and if we are going to do the half days, that the kids aren't here and that we receive state funding for them, that we're using them to the direct benefit of the students. Those are my impressions. I don't know, Lee, did you have any?
No, I thought it was a good discussion. It was helpful to get more specific information on what actually happens in the early release time. But one of the eye-openers for me is that you actually, I think staff development is the wrong word. You guys aren't really developing yourself as staff. You're actually talking about kids and what their results are and comparing and figuring out how to go forward and, teach them better. And I think that's a message that's not out there. I'm assuming the rest of us on the board hear this, but from parents, like, why are the teachers having to develop for 2 hours, and I've got to find daycare for my kids, and it's a big inconvenience, and how does it help my kid? And they don't see that. So I think there needs to be some better education as to why that's happening, and we had this discussion. I'm kind of repeating it a little bit, but they're concerned about what benefit it is to their kid, and they need to hear what that benefit is rather than hearing that it's staff development, which is some very vague term to them. So that was interesting to hear that, and you see more of the importance of it. I'm assuming that, or my expectation would be, you continue to have those kind of discussions in the next 3 times you have early release. And that wasn't real clear at Meet and Confer as to what happens in the next ones. So I guess I would like to hear a little bit more about that. So, I can support it, but I'd still like to know a little bit more about what happens in the next ones. And I know that this is the calendar for next year, and I know there's an awful lot of parents out there waiting to see what our calendar is going to be. So there is some urgency for us to approve this calendar.
Go ahead, Tom.
I'm going to echo Eric's concern. While I understand the data comes out in September, that probably is a great day for the staff to get together to analyze that data. However, I've had quite a few parents come to me and say, with the staff development, what are they developing? What's going on? And I think it's either been brought by the administration as a staff development day, which really doesn't, I guess from what you spoke to, doesn't really show what goes on. And there's a perception in the community, oh, the kids are out early, now I've got a problem, especially the elementary kids. What do I do with my child? Because we've got these days that are scattered throughout the year. I have heard the comment, when do they go 5 days a week? There's not a lot of weeks where we have 5 days of school. It's less than half the days of actually half the weeks of the month through the calendar year. So I applaud what happened in September. I have a tough time seeing that that will continue throughout the others. And maybe someone can address that, what happens during those days. One of them is right toward the end of the year.
Maybe Jeff Holmberg would like to speak to staff development and
one of the things that we've talked about throughout the year and what has been presented is really kind of an overview of what happens during those days. Now, obviously with our state shutdown and late release of the scores, typically that's kind of the way we do business, is that in the fall we have an early release or a late release to go over that data. But I think the one thing that is kind of the next part of that conversation is that that's not the only data we look at. We have common assessments, we have map test data, we have brand new curriculums that we're implementing, all at the benefit of students. And so for that type of planning and that type of making sure that we're actually using all those materials to the fullest possible potential and looking at all that assessment data to ensure that kids are getting the individualized instruction that they need, frequent time, or those times are invaluable to our staff. Many of our staff members do not have a common prep time, time during the day where they're able to meet, collaborate with their colleagues or with common grade level members. And so that poses some challenges. These times, we can certainly go into more depth what we've got planned for the rest of the year, and I can bring that to the board, to share with you what we have in store. But those times are very packed with things to do and activities, but also at the core is benefiting student learning and making sure that when students come back to school, that the lessons that are there are meeting their needs at that period of time. And the best research is telling us that happens frequently and periodically when we bring staff together for collaboration. So.
Any other questions?
I think the comments have all been said well. Just Deb Johnson, did you want to say anything more about how the rest of the days are being organized, or from your perspective as our PLSEA president?
When we do the 2-hour release days, those are almost always during my.
Yes.
I can just walk it. When we do those 2-hour release days, those times are nearly always focused on students, and whether we're looking at curriculum or whether we're looking at test data or whether we're looking as a department at common curriculum and assessments. This year particularly is unique because going to quarters and semesters, there will be students who may have a semester class, but each quarter have a different teacher. So we have to have the time to make sure that what we're teaching is common and the same concepts, so that when students come second quarter, they can pick right up where they left off, no matter which teacher they have, as well as the common assessment tools. So those days are time for that. We also do work on PDPs, and nearly all of our PDPs are connected to student achievement in some way. So we may be looking at best practice in transition time during a 60-minute class period, so that we keep student attention and don't lose it because they're sitting there for an hour trying to listen or take notes. And so it's looking at those best practice techniques that we work on as departments or grade levels that we need to do in order to make 60-minute class periods effective at the secondary level, as well as the transition time at the grade school levels. So there's no doubt in my mind, or any of our minds, that we're very grateful to have 4 days of 2 hours. Do we need, in an ideal world, according to best practice, we'd be doing it weekly, or we'd be doing it at least twice a month, because you need to be able to collaborate and talk to our colleagues and other teachers in order to find out what's working, what's not working, and what is best practice in the classroom. So we could have this conversation right before the next release day or right after, and we'd still bring things to you that are directly related to student achievement, our ability to adapt our curriculums to meet our students' needs, and to assess students in a fair and equitable way. So if we want to have that further conversation with Jeff and Steve and Sheila and Eric, we can do that. Sorry. But I do think they're very valuable, and I think no matter when we have this conversation, whether it's the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, you're going to hear similar kinds of information and things going on.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Yes.
I would just close by saying that there is 100% agreement of our administrative staff that these days are valuable and that they're valued by our staff, that they are critical to increasing student performance over time. We lost a half a day this year when we moved to quarters because we needed a half a day for that assessment time. So we are to lose anything more, I think, would certainly impact the quality that of that data-driven decision-making that we're doing, and finding time to do that would have to happen in a different way, which would, again, I think, be to the detriment of what we have going now. We are working very hard to continue to raise the bar, and we need that professional time for our teachers to break down that data in order to understand their students and what their needs are at least 4 times a year.
But we have 2 in the first quarter, none in the second, 1 in the third and 1 in the fourth, and the fourth is rather late in the fourth quarter.
Putting this calendar together is quite the mosaic. But trying to balance the quarters to make sure that we've got those 2-hour early release in times that are important to student learning is critical. And then implementing them is, again, a challenge. And for that, we have the year-long professional development calendar and broken down by what happens on each and every one of those days outside of the school day for the student. This year, as we look to our next calendar, which will be 13-14, because we're looking at the 12-13 calendar right now, as we look to build the 13-14 calendar, we will have the benefit of 3 board members on the committee to help inform and learn and be partners with our Meet and Confer committee as we make up that calendar together. And I would love to see us be able to make some different changes. Maybe there's a better way to do that. Maybe there's a better way to offer our professional development and data-driven decision-making time that we haven't even considered. Or maybe there's an old way that we could bring back. But I do believe the 12-13 calendar is the very best we could do given our change from trimesters to quarters and our commitment to student learning.
Okay, Mike?
I'm going to echo what Lee said in terms of, we need to make a decision. I realize that. But I would like to strongly suggest that we need to really look at truly the entire community's pros and cons here. We've heard from the staff perspective what the pros are. I think it's really been just the board that's echoing some of the cons, if you will, that we've heard from the community. And much like I think many of these other decisions when we do ABC and other things, I think we do a thorough analysis of the entire impact of what those decisions are, and I think this is no different, quite honestly. I know that we don't have unlimited resources, but would we consider, to the comment made, that we get 2 hours? I mean, is a better model to say, let's get 1 extra day off and consolidate that, So what I would really challenge that committee as you go forward is, let's not even look at what we've done in the past. Let's look at what's the right thing going forward and start from that standpoint. To say that we've lost or gained or whatever, I think is really kind of putting ourselves in a hole. I think what we really got to look at is say, what's right for kids first and foremost, which we drive everything, what's right for our staff and administration, but there is another leg here, which is what's right for the community. because there is an impact, especially when we're taking the kids out on early release and everything. So I really think all three of those stakeholders need to be considered from the pros and the cons. And that's what I'll be looking, to weigh my decision going forward on.
Anything else? Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to approve the calendar for 2012-2013 as presented. By Lee, second. Second. By Tom. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Nay. That carries 5-2. Thank you. Next, we're moving on to new business, approval of sale of general obligation school bonds, refunding.
Good evening, Board Chair Pratt, Dr. Gruber, and board members. Tonight, I'm here to discuss the results of our bond sale that happened on October 3rd. As you recall, we had two bonds that we are refunding. One was for $18,400,000 from the 2005 series, and the other one was a $5 million general obligation school bond from 2003. In this process of this bond refunding, the district did discuss the district's bond rating with Moody's, and they did upgrade the district's bond rating, which is quite the coup for the district to improve that 2 years in a row. And so that's really good news that we are improving in our financial status in our district. So our rating was an A1, and now we are a AA3 with an enhanced rating of a AA2. We did receive 7 bids, and with our low bidder being Baird out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with an interest rate of just a little over 1.9%. Our highest bid was a 2.1, so you can see there was a very small difference in the bids from low to high. We're planning to save, or with this utilizing the low bid, we will save over the remaining terms of these bonds $877,000 in interest. So my recommendation is that the board approve the resolution for the low bid Baird from Milwaukee.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the bid from Baird of Milwaukee? By Mike. Second?
Second.
By Stacy. Any questions or discussion?
It's great news.
Okay. Excellent.
It is
Great
great
news.
news.
Okay. A little below where we had hoped to be when we talked about it, but well above the threshold that we set as a board a few weeks ago, and so I think good news overall. Well, if there are no other comments or questions, we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. Todd?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
I vote aye. Stacy?
Aye.
And Tom?
Aye.
That motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have major magnitude field trip approval to Washington, D.C. Ms. Knettel and Mr. Dapper. Or just Ms. Knettel.
I told Mr. Dapper he could stay home because he has the 2-hour layover next week in Atlanta with 80 kids. So I said I'd stay for the board meeting. I'm paying him back. So I'm here tonight seeking board approval for our major magnitude field trip for the 2012 Washington, D.C. field trip for our 8th graders, middle level.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the major magnitude field trip to Washington, D.C.?
So moved.
By Todd, second?
Second.
By Tom. Any questions or discussion? Tom?
This is basically the same as you've done in past
Yep.
years?
Yep.
Same company you're going through?
Yep, they've secured our pricing for, I think, the 4th year in a row without raising our rates, which has been very nice. They've worked really hard, which is, pretty amazing that they've been able to do that for us. So the trip cost next year for our students will be $1,395, which is the rate that we've been able to secure for the last 4 years.
Yes, Lee.
I realize you're using the same company, and there's a comfort level there, and the prices stayed the same, but have you thought of looking at any other companies?
Last year, we did go through a quote process with a local travel agency, put together a package and presented that. They were not able to offer the same amount of services for the same cost. So we felt that we were getting more, well, not us, but for our students going on the trip and families, that they were really getting more for their money continuing with the same company that we've used.
And number of students?
This year's trip, which we leave for next week, we're taking 132. Previous year was 150. So we kind of take those, we've gotten to the point where we take the number of students interested in attending.
Were you happy with the flight reservations for this year?
For
this year, you said the 2-hour layover in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Were you happy with what they came up with?
With the growing number of students going, it's we come across. We typically end up with group reservations. So it's actually this year we fought very hard to stick with a maximum of 2 different airlines, which allows us to travel more efficiently as a group. And so we do have one small group that has a short layover. But all of the other groups are direct flights. We've emphasized with the company we use that direct flights are our preference, and they do as best they can to accommodate that. It's challenging with the number of students that we take.
Right. I'm just wondering because I know someone going on the connecting flight.
Yeah.
There on what happens when they're delayed and.
Yeah. We've been very fortunate in that we haven't ever experienced that, so we've been really lucky in the years that we've traveled.
Well, I've just got to say, I've had both my kids have gone on this trip, and it's been an incredible experience for them. And you say it in your write-up, and I think it's true. It really connects the American history lessons that we're teaching them to be able to see it, experience it is just a fabulous experience. And I hope that we continue to do this trip, for as long as we're a school district. I think it's one of the jewels in our crown that we're able to do this.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. Next, we have the Minnesota State High School League grant for free and reduced lunch participants. Mr. Rodin.
Chairman Pratt, Dr. Groover, School Board. I'm looking to get approval for this grant. Once again, for newer board members, this is a grant that we apply for every year through the Minnesota State High School League Foundation, trying to appease some of the costs for our free and reduced lunch students that want to participate in athletics or activities that are offered through the Minnesota State High School League. So I don't know, did they get the numbers, Martha, on that? No? So we have currently we have 244 free and reduced students at the high school, and we have 72 that participated in either the winter, spring, or this fall. So those are the numbers that I will send in to the Minnesota State High School League Foundation to look for some grant money from them. And basically what they do is the grant money comes, the bill was re-upped again this last year with the legislature. So what it does is it takes all the state tax that they would apply towards tickets with the State High School League, and then the State High School League puts that money into a foundation, and then they use that for grants for these type of things.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the application for grant as presented? By Lee. Second?
Second.
By Stacy. Any questions or discussion? Yes.
What's the normal amount that you usually get awarded?
It's gone down every year. I've applied for this every year. I believe the first year we received about $3,000. Last year was $965. So, and the reason it goes down, unfortunately, is that other school districts like Eden Prairie apply for it as well. So more and more schools are feeling the need to apply for it.
And do you see, is the need increasing for monies like this?
Yes, the need is increasing. Last year, we offered more waivers per se than we ever have in the past. So the needs are becoming more and more prevalent.
Yes, John? Oh, sorry. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a needed program. And next we have class size report. Mr. Holmberg.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Dr. Groover. I'm here tonight with a couple of items on the board agenda. I'll start with the class size report. This is typical in previous years to come to the board once the school year has started to present the numbers of what our class sizes look like across the district. This past year, I think the board has been a little bit more hands-on with looking at some of the numbers as well as looking at some of the staffing requests. Looking at a June allocation of staffing as well as August. This report does indicate and includes and it reflects the additional staffing by the school board during the June and August board meetings. And so the numbers are as of today. Typically in the fall of every school year, we do have an influx of students as well as an outgoing group of students. And so the first month is devoted to making sure we get the accurate numbers of incoming and outgoing students and looking toward October 1st to really kind of what's the numbers of students that we're going to have as we start looking through the course of the school year here. So we do have this broken out according to elementary as well as at every grade level. One thing I would like to point out to you, for the most part, class size, our goal here is to try to balance class sizes across the district. Now there may be some class size that might be a little bit slightly higher, but they're typically within a normal range or a smaller range, so that we try to balance those across the district so that there is an equitability here. I would like to point out Red Tail Ridge at 4th grade. That we have 4 sections there, not 3. And so looking at that, we're looking at 24.25 as our average for. So I apologize for that, but I wanted to point that out to you so that it is accurate. Looking across the secondary level, as you know, we did move toward the 6-period day this year, and that did factor into our scheduling of class sizes. And I do want to foreshadow a little bit the class size numbers in preparation for kind of that 6-period day update that's coming up on the agenda here. When you look at the secondary class sizes, you do see some stress points there, particularly at the high school, but also at the middle school you can also see somewhat balanced numbers between Hidden Oaks and Twin Oaks. While averages do tell a story, they don't tell the whole story. We do have instances where we have some classes that approach 40, and we do have some classes that approach the upper 20s, which, when you average them out, average roughly about what you see there. We've had a couple of different things as we've gone through our scheduling process with the 6-period day, and that's some of the class size equity issues of the scheduling process and some of the school choice or student choice options for students. And so when we implemented the 6-period day schedule, we knew there would be some growing pains, and so this is something that we're going to be looking at this year of what we're going to be doing to address some of those class sizes as well as the registration process so that we can balance out some of those unequal class sizes and provide more choice for students. And the main reason that we saw some of those difficulties in scheduling was the quarter semester options. We did have some conflicts with that, and speaking with administrators at the middle school and high school, that seemed to that seemed to be one of the factors that led to some of the difficulties in getting balanced class sizes for every class. So at the very end, the grand total, I do want to point out that that does include 75 PSEO students in the final count. You know, those are students that are attending, post-secondary, but we do count them in our total here. So, and so this is a report for you this evening, and I will reference back to this on the 6th period day update too. So, any questions?
What about the ALC?
ALC is listed
Or
here
it's
in the total enrollment, just right next to private school. I think as we look at some of these secondary class numbers, Dr. Groover and I were talking a little bit about as we move through the first semester and start looking at the second semester, we may need to talk about and come back to the board with recommendations for different staffing components, looking at the numbers that are available there and work with our secondary administrators on that.
And that would be using the contingency that I have left over in the superintendent contingency that we discussed this August when we allotted those teachers to the elementary level, knowing there might be some minor adjustments that are needed at the secondary level. So I'm in conversation with Mr. Lund and Mr. Dahl and Edwards, Kuznetsov, and Siegel to talk about what those changes might be, if there are any. They'll be slight, most probably, because it would be a 0.1, 0.2, somewhere in that, if we added one more class to a section, to a school. So we'll bring that back to you as we further analyze it and have a recommendation for second semester.
As one of the things we do notice with our trends for the last several years, when you're looking at student enrollment, typically this is the highest point in the school year. As the school year does go on, our student enrollment typically starts to decline. That seems to be the trend with past years, and so that's something we're going to be monitoring too, as far as the school year goes. You know, are we retaining our students, or some of our students leaving, or are more students coming in? So, any other questions?
Any areas of concern that you see where we might need to look at additional staffing out of the superintendent's contingency?
Mr. Lund, is the last one I talked to about this, but you'd need a microphone or come to the microphone.
Either way. We kind of need to see where the numbers play out. What's not shown in this, what drives some of the numbers, is when you take a look, we're looking at our standard core classes here, mixed in our honors classes and AP classes. If you have one section of AP class, we offered it with 28 or 27 kids, which drives the general numbers. The more classes you offer, the more. We got classes as high as 44 and classes down as low as 25. This is an average. I think we need to get through the first semester to kind of see where those AP classes level out, to kind of see if there are, traditionally what happens, we have students that we find out are misplaced, and if they come out, you know, sometimes we can take two AP sections and combine them into one section and then reallocate that FTE into another area. So to tell you where the hot button area, I wouldn't even want to guess, to tell you the truth right now, until we see everything kind of even out. You look at the numbers there, they're kind of staggering, but in some of our senior English, we're going up against honors English, AP English, and regular English. And as we try to, you know, mitigate the peaks and valleys, I'll have a better answer around Christmas. Does that make sense? Sure. Kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave, I just had a question. With the 6th period day, I mean, I know there's somewhat less flexibility for those kind of situations where, I mean, there may be somebody struggling in AP. Have we had movement that way? I mean, like, they want to get out of the class, or, I mean, I'm just, are kids getting limited and not being able to move?
Yes and no. It depends on the reason for the move. If we have somebody that through the counseling office and through the teacher we feel is placed in over their head, I mean, this class is beyond them, we will find a way to move them. We're not going to disadvantage the child in a misplacement. If a student that just doesn't like the grade they're getting, we don't move them out. But if there's a student who is clearly in over the head, we'll find a way. And actually, we just met with The high school administrative team and counselors met today to discuss that. As we come up on our quarter break here on November 10th, will be the end of the first quarter. That's when we're really going to have to take a look at our honors and our AP classes to see who is inadequately placed, because we have a chance to move at that time.
Any other questions? Okay. This was just a report, if I recall.
Yes.
So next we have the AYP status report.
This evening, I'm coming back to you really as a continuation from the last board meeting regarding our test scores. At the time, it was still not officially known what our adequate yearly progress or our AYP status was, and so I have a very brief presentation for you to let you know officially where we stand as a district, as where our sites stand, and how we plan to move forward. Overall, this has been a sounding point that I have spoken with many of you on, as well as with our public, but the district and sites demonstrated growth from the previous year's MCA2 and also MCA3. MCA3 was brand new, but from MCA2 results. We did meet established index levels for overall proficiency and by subgroup in many areas, and many of our areas did also meet safe harbor, where we met AYP criteria based on the amount of growth in the subgroup from previous years. Officially for the 2011-12 school year, the district did not meet AYP requirements for reading, but in the subgroup of special education. There's an interesting spin to this. Over the past couple years, the district has not met AYP requirements in math, and during that time has met AYP requirements in reading. And so, while we did not make AYP or adequate yearly progress in reading as a district, we did in math, and therefore we have improved our overall stage. We've moved out of the continuing in needs of improvement stage. It is very important that as a district, when you're looking at AYP, that consecutive years growth in reading and math are very important. We have met federal requirements for AYP in math for 2 years, and so therefore we are out of the consequence phase, but ultimately, by not making AYP, we're in the watch phase for reading. So, kind of an interesting twist. Put that out there for you for consideration. We'll talk about really what does that mean as we go through this. We are no longer in the consequence stage of AYP, and so what that means is over the past several years, we've had to submit a plan to the Minnesota Department of Education. As a result of this, we do not necessarily need to create or submit a plan to the Minnesota Department of Education right now. However, we've got a plan in place. And as I've mentioned before, the plan that's been in place is a 2-year plan. And so our plan continues to include the current 11-12 school year. We're going to continue to use that plan. We're going to revise and update it to articulate those professional development and instructional activities we need to do. And we're going to be including activities for reading and math and special education, and make sure that we continue to align those activities with our new curriculum adoption, but also looking at the data for special education students and putting strategies into place to meet their needs. One of the consequences that we do have is the public reporting, and that's sending a letter out to the community and parents that lets them know what our status is and what we're doing to improve our status. And so after this board meeting and later this week, there will be a letter sent out to all district parents regarding what AYP means for Prior Lake Savage Area schools. At the site level, we also did see some improvement there as well. When you're looking at schools receiving title funds versus schools not receiving title funds, if you're a school that receives title funds, that's where the consequences do have some teeth. If you're a school that does not directly receive title funding, you are on the list of whether you're still either making AYP or not making AYP, but the consequences are not there other than the public reporting. And so when we look at our schools receiving title funds, all of our schools made AYP this year. And you can see from last year, Red Tail Ridge in the special ed subgroup in reading and math, they did make it this year, so there's improvement there. And as you know, Five Hawks, they made AYP this year. It's a very good thing for them. However, they're continuing to work with their plan as well because they need to make adequate yearly progress for 2 consecutive years. Even though they made adequate yearly progress, they still have to allow school choice for their students, and I'll be talking a little bit about that on the next slide or so, at least until they meet AYP for 2 consecutive years. Schools not receiving title funds. Glendale made AYP, Hidden Oaks, Jeffers Pond did not make AYP, again in the special ed subgroup. Twin Oaks did not make AYP in the special ed subgroup of reading and math. Prior Lake High School, it was the area free and reduced price lunch subgroup reading, and Prior Lake ALC did not make AYP in math. And so these are things that we're going to be looking at. These are the special ed subgroup seems to be a consistent area that does come up. It is very similar to other school districts. Students that are on an IEP are still held to proficiency standards set out by No Child Left Behind. So presently, those are the rules in which we're under, and we're going to continue to work within those rules and work with all students to make sure that they continue to improve. The school choice requirements for Five Hawks. Presently, they did notify parents within their attendance boundary of the needs improvement status and option for school choice. They will be getting together to revise and continue to implement their school improvement plan. And they need, as a result of the school choice component, we did set aside district title allocation for school choice. As a result, however, no families have elected to attend the option, which was Greenwood in 11 and 12. And so that set aside will be redistributed back to the other title schools to be used for additional programming. And so, the other consequence that Five Hawks has, they do need to set aside 10% of their title allocation for professional development. And that's implementing their site improvement plan. Our next steps, we've already started getting into the subgroup results and test data. We'll be setting and establishing SMART goals, looking at reading and math. Five Hawks will continue with their school site improvement plan. And we're going to be bringing that MCA 2 and 3 data and incorporating that into the planning, curriculum and instruction for reading language arts curriculum adoption, as well as the mathematics and science. Next steps at the state level. As you know, we're still monitoring that state waiver. The request for waiver from No Child Left Behind. Most likely, not a sure thing, but there's anticipated changes in 2012 and 13 with accountabilities and steps. And if that's the case, there will be a new process of accountability and steps which will need to educate students, staff, and community regarding the process. But until that time, the district and sites will comply with No Child Left Behind. And pending the outcome, we'll work in partnership with the MDE to implement a new accountability system. So, our key points as a district, we continue to outperform state averages in math, science, and reading. The percent of students at the proficient or above level increased in multiple levels in math, reading, and science. And that is the encouraging news that we really need to continue to tell our community as well as our students and our staff. There's a lot of great work going on, and our students are showing that growth. It's just with sometimes No Child Left Behind, sometimes they don't improve enough. And so we will update our vision cards to establish measurable district and site improvement goals, and we'll continue to look at other test data and look at where students are at in our common assessments and put those instructional activities in place to meet their needs. Questions or discussion?
Any questions? There's a lot to take in. I don't have anything at this time. What did you?
No.
Go ahead.
It's a complex issue, the AYP designation, as Jeff twisted and turned back through this data to help you try to understand it. We'll continue to unravel it and find the meaning for our students at each of our sites and help them get the necessary skills and talents to be able to pass these tests, our students. So thank you.
And I think next you were up for six-period day?
I want to reference, we're a little out of sequence here between the class size, AYP, and now six-period day. So I will be referencing back that class size component. When the board approved this shift to a six-period day, we knew that there would be the practical side of implementing a six-period day, from scheduling to curriculum to assessment to working through all the kinks when we made that shift. And so as we move forward this year, right now kids are in school, we're implementing the six-period day, there's learning happening. Underneath that, there's a few other things that are going on as well. And so as we move forward, we're going to be looking at how curriculum, instruction, and assessment is happening during a six-period day and continuing to support teachers to make sure that they're aligning their curriculum and making sure that the standards are being met within that six-period day format. What I have as an update for you tonight is I've been meeting with secondary principals and assistant principals and talking about the process of scheduling students into those courses. And I already referenced that for you this evening, that we did have some hiccups and some challenges with having kids or scheduling kids at the secondary level. And there seems to be a common denominator in some of those challenges. One is in some cases, the unequal class size. You know, where you have a class, it's the same class in some cases, but one class is 40 and the other one's in the mid-20s, and there's a disparity there. We also, and some of that has to do with our quarter and our semester. You know, and sometimes at some point, the quarters and semesters do conflict, and that causes some problems, unequal class sizes, but also it limits student choice. And that's the second component that our administrators are noticing too in scheduling students in a six-period day, is that we have instances where students do not get their first 5 or 6 or 7 choices of an elective because of their complexities with the schedule and how tight the schedule is. And so what I'm recommending and bringing forward to you tonight is I'm going to be convening a small task force with the secondary principals to do kind of a conversation about tweaks. What tweaks can be made so that we can ease the scheduling of secondary classes at the middle and high school level. And you may be asking, why so soon? As much as we're very at the kind of the front end of starting the school year, by December we need to have our registration and our materials set for the 2012-2013 school year. And so if we're looking at registration and the process for registering, this is a discussion and a meeting that we need to have this fall so that we can bring any recommendations or any revisions to that process to the District Curriculum Advisory Committee in November, and then subsequently to the board if there are any recommendations to be presented and approval sought for implementation. So that would be the big thing that we're going to be moving forward here in the next several weeks, and I wanted to bring that to your attention, as well as to let you know that we're going to be moving very quickly to identify what we can do to make that process better the next time around.
Any questions? Yes.
Will you be at the same time then looking at second semester as part of that conversation?
Yes, we will be. Yes, we will be looking at the second semester the rest of the year. I think, as Mr. Lund mentioned, you know, there are some things we need to get through the first semester on, as far as if there are any tweaks that need to be made. But if we're looking for anything for next year and getting school ready for next year, that would be the core or the lion's share of that meeting.
Great.
I'll just speak for myself. I think, you know, our experience has been generally neutral on the change, and I think that's good. I would have been surprised if you weren't coming back and asking for tweaks, because it is a huge change, and I'd be surprised if we did it right the first time. And so, you know, I wholly support your effort to have that conversation. Because we do want this to be the right thing for the long term. Anybody else?
I think I just maybe state that, you know, when I hear classes of 44 and being in the building and the amount of desks that are probably in a room, you know, I think anything that we can do, you know, like intervening at the semester time period I would just encourage you to look at that. I mean, those are definitely stress points in my mind, no matter what the class is, whether. So I would just encourage people to get creative as much as they can.
Christian, you have a comment? Oh, I'm sorry. Misunderstood. Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you
Well,
very
Thank you very much. We have no policy on the agenda this evening.
We have a meeting on
Thursday.
And so we'll skip to superintendent's report.
Yes. I had just asked Chris if he was going to speak about homecoming week, and he said yes. He is. They have great news to share. I also have great news to share. Our own Tom Anderson has been named to our Minnesota School Boards Association Delegate Assembly, and will be representing Prior Lake and Area 17, along with a representative from Belle Plaine, Jordan, Shakopee, and Central Schools. Those are your area, and we're very proud to have him serve us and represent our school board on our behalf, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Second of all, our robotics club, which happens after school and has been grown under the leadership of Joe Passifero, was honored this past week at City Hall. Mayor Mike Miser proclaimed October 12th, which is this Wednesday, as King Tech Day in the city of Prior Lake. There have been lots of awards granted to this, awarded to this very talented group and continuing evolving group of young engineers, and we are very proud of their work that happens outside of the school day under the leadership of our Joe Passifero and the other team leaders and sponsors, as well as volunteers. So congratulations to them. And then last week, we honored our board scholars. We had 253 10th through 12th graders, including our own Chris, right next to me, who was honored as a board scholar. To be a board scholar, a student must maintain a 3.8 average over the course of the entire year. So congratulations. That's not an easy task to accomplish, and to have 253 of them is really quite amazing. So we're very proud of them. And lastly, our summer eco camp, which is a collaboration between our community education department and our environmental education coordinator, Kara Rickenberg, and a cast of Prior Lake Savage area teachers that commit themselves to a summer program. This program this year received the Minnesota Community Education Association statewide award as a project just in recognition of the work that they do. And they'll be presented, our community ed department will be presented that award during their fall conference. But then later this winter, we will have a representative from their leadership come and present that award to the group here in front of the board. So all good things happening, and we're continuing to see great things in our schools on a daily basis. So.
Okay, next we'll go to board reports, and we'll start with Chris.
I was just going to speak a little bit about the homecoming week that we had last week. I think it was one of the best ones that I was involved in throughout my high school. I know it was my senior year, but it was just very well behaved with all the students. The Pep Fest was on Friday, and I think that it was the best Pep Fest that we've had at Prior Lake since I've been there. Many teachers stopped me in the hallway today and said that they're very proud of how our students behaved at the Pep Fest. It went very smooth, which was good. And we actually had a performance by Jordan King, who did a karate act, and it was one of the most fascinating performances of the Pep Fest. Got a standing ovation. It was really cool to see that. And then the dance went really well on Saturday. We sold 1,400 tickets to the students throughout the week. We didn't have any violations. Nobody got kicked out. So I thought it was a very successful homecoming week. And next Wednesday, October 19th, we're having a pink out at the football game against Lakeville North, and we ask everybody to dress up in a pink shirt, pink sweatshirt, as we recognize and promote breast cancer awareness.
Okay, thanks. Any other board reports? Mike.
The Transportation Committee met last week to start the preliminary discussions. Our 4-year contract that we have had with our bus contractors is coming to a close at the end of this school year, and so it's time to start those negotiations again. And so we kind of looked at where we're at, and Julie and Jim will kind of go forward with really the conversations and keep the rest of us, Stacy and I and Dr. Groover, apprised of where they're at. But I think at this point, this last contract was a change in what we had had previously, so there was a lot of effort involved in that. But I think we all were in agreement that that contract has served us well, and I believe that's both sides of the deal. And so, presuming that the contractors would like to stay with that same format, that's the plan for now, and we hope that it'll prove to be successful as it was.
Okay. I'll speak briefly on Building Committee. Building Committee did not meet during the month of September due to scheduling conflicts, and we had no pressing issues to discuss, so our next meeting will be the end of the month. Any other board reports? Any other administrative reports? I forgot to ask you guys. Yes, Jeff.
Last week, our eSTEM World Language Immersion group met for the very first time, started looking over research, and started to craft a working definition for the school district. We will be meeting again here shortly and starting to talk about recommendations coming forward. We have kind of split the study into 2 distinct components. We're going to focus on eSTEM part first, and then as recommendations come forward, we'll bring those to the board as part of our communications process, and then ultimately we will transition to the world language immersion portion of the study. So,
great, thank you. Okay, upcoming events, we have conferences coming up for K-5 on the 13th and 14th, and 6 through 12 on the 17th and 18th. No school on the 19th through the 21st. I believe that's MEA. And then our next board meeting is scheduled for October 24th. Any other events upcoming that should be brought forward? Okay. Seeing none, I will take a motion to move into closed session to talk about negotiation strategy. Do I have a motion? And then we'll open it up afterwards to close the meeting. Do I have a motion to move into closed session? By Lee, second by Todd. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. It's 8:45. Why don't we take a 5-minute recess and convene at 8:50? Thank you.
And then you won on it.
Quite a few in
Really?
there, too.
Yeah.
It's all the
Session and back in open session. I'll take a motion to close the meeting.
So move. Or no.
Or adjourn.
Adjourn.
Thank you.
So move.
By Stacy, second. Second. By Tom. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. We stand adjourned.
Thank you.